Test 1, 2. All right, let's get started. Good evening. How's everybody tonight? Here for midweek Bible study. All right. Chris is not here. He asked me 2 weeks ago, he said, hey, one of you guys in the booth back there want to cover my lesson for me on the 20th of August. Well, Don Orr sat quiet for a minute, so I said, sure, Chris, I'll take that assignment for you, right? And I'm thinking, it's Psalms. You know, how hard can it be? And to be honest with you, I have probably not prepared as much as I'd like to, because I think I oversimplified what I was going to speak to you about tonight. So, you know, in traditional, guys know I'm an engineer. I think like an engineer. I say things like an engineer. So you'll see tonight that I've got, prop number 1. I've got prop number 2. I've got some other printed material. I've got electronic device number 3 and my phone. So obviously, you're probably sitting there thinking, this is very unorganized already. And it is. So I'm going to try to get through the content the best way and the most organized way I can. But I said I'm an engineer, so I'm going to think about it with as much presentation style as I can, but I'll lean back on my engineering style some. So if I look at you and I see some nodding off or something, thanks for the sign, I'll try to pick it up a little bit, all right? So again, thank you all for being here tonight. We're going to cover the book of Psalms, okay? So, Chris has been doing this one chapter at a time thing. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. He gave me a list. He said, pick out 1 or 2 Psalms you want to talk about. And I said, sure. I could not do that. So it's a little bit, if you'll bear with me, I'll spend more time setting up the lesson, probably, than we spend talking about it. So I want to share with you my thoughts a little bit. First off, I didn't want to do what Chris is doing because I don't know what he's got next, and I don't want to step on his toes or us have the same content 2 weeks in a row. So that was the reason for me to kind of jump into this subject matter tonight. How many of you have read the book of Psalms? I want to show of hands. We'll do some audience participation right away. The book of Psalms, right? So a quick count tells me 50% raised your hand. Another 25 or 30% didn't raise your hand, but you have read it, right? So I think we've got a pretty good cross-section of people that said, I am familiar with the book of Psalms, all right? So if I called on anyone to tell me, Chad Penston, you're a willing participant, what is the book of Psalms? What does it mean to you? Praises to God, right? So it says so in the introduction. It's about the Jews having these spiritual psalms, hymns, laments, sayings, choose a word, that they uttered while they were in worship to God. And then maybe at other times, they used those same things, those same utterances, if you will. So there's 150 chapters or 150 hymns in the book of Psalms. So there's a lot of content there. So you're like, Don, how in the world are you going to cover all of that? Well, I don't know. So bear with me a little bit as we get through it. So now that we understand the context, we're talking about the book of Psalms, I want to ask you another question. How do you think singing, chants, laments, if you will, how were they invented? Who invented them? Where did it start? So if you were in my class last semester, I'm looking at Felicia and some of the others, you may remember some of this material because we covered some of it in brevity there. But I think this is an important thing because I don't believe, of course, God created Adam and Eve. They could have came out singing miraculously. They had voice, they had utterance. It's possible. Scriptures doesn't really tell us this. So a lot of what I'm saying here is a little bit presumptuous on my part. But if you'll bear with me, I think where we'll go with this, I want to challenge your thinking a little bit and then maybe tie it back into, for our faith, why is singing so important to us? So if I said, what is the earliest context of singing that you've ever read about? Have you ever researched that? Have you ever taken out your trusty Google device and said, who was the first person that was a singer? You know, sometimes our frame of reference about things in life, inventions, modern day technology, is bookended by what we can remember, okay? It depends on your age, 10 years, 100 years, depending on how you remember things, right? How many of you can remember in this room before TVs existed in everyone's home? Some of you. How many of you can remember not having a smart device? So in context, we all have different frames of references. But when we're talking about singing, what's the first reference you have of singing? For me, singing was, as a youngster, I won't know how old that is really, I can remember my mother singing in the kitchen. She could be cooking, she could be cleaning, whatever. She was by herself doing her own thing. It was modern day earbuds, right, going on or in that time. So she was singing. And I grew up around a family that sang. When we got together for events and those kind of things, singing was happening. And a lot of those songs were religious. And so singing, I think, has been a part of our lives, no matter how old you are, what generation you come from, probably from the earliest memories you have as a person. But where did singing start? Why was it so important that an entire book in the inspired word is about singing? I still don't think it just happened by happenstance. So let's think about it in a different context. I'm a part of the creation. I'm a part of early civilization as God created it. Whether I'm Adam or whether I'm Eve or whether I'm one of the early generations, was I born being able to speak and articulate thought? Again, the challenge is there, right? How do you think about singing? How did it evolve from having no communication skills, potentially? The Bible doesn't really tell us how Adam and Eve were created in terms of their skill set to communicate. How did they communicate with one another? We don't know. But if animals were there, we know they were shortly thereafter because Genesis tells us that. Then we could assume that birds were singing. Whatever wild animals there were around them had a communication style. It was not developed. So when I ask you, where did it start from? That's where my reference is. So how did we evolve, for lack of a better term, from not having a communication skill set to evolving into where singing is referenced in an entire in an entire book in the Old Testament, and there are many references to it throughout the New Testament. It is something we're expected to do. I've never been to a church service where there wasn't singing. Whether it's denomination, whether it's congregation, anything. Anything you see on TV about evangelism in any way includes singing. Mission work in foreign fields. You can pick up the melody of the song, but you may not understand the language, but there's always singing. It's important. Right? It's important. I want to read something to you. Bear with me just a little bit. I don't like reading a lot of notes, but I think this is really important. So I found today, this was copyrighted in 1990, Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, has this paper written about human voice and singing. So I'll read excerpts from it for just a second, so bear with me a minute. So just as a quote, prehistoric vocalism. In the beginning was the voice. Voice is sounding breath, the audible sign of life. So that's how this article starts. So what I'm trying to express to you tonight is, I think that's a perfect written statement from where I wanted to start with, and that is, it was an audible expression of breath. It could have been a grunt. It could have been mimicking a bird, the buzzing of a bee, a lion roar. I do not believe for a second that singing in its infancy and its origination started with the book of praises, with lyrical sheets and all the lyrics and all the music notes and all those things, right? It didn't start that way. But over time it evolved. It evolved even in early times of creation. Yes, it had to have. But at some point in that evolution of communication, words, singing became something that was so important, just to early people in general, that it occupies an entire book within the Scriptures, Old Testament. There's more things we could talk about here about, the specific Psalms, chapter by chapter, and the musical instruments that's referenced and those kind of things, and that is not at all what my subject is about tonight. So I don't want us to go there. But I do want you to think about, as we apply singing in our worship, how should we use this style of worship so that we have a better appreciation of what the Bible is clearly telling us is super important? One more show of hands. Sorry. I'm going to start. How many of you like to sing okay, but maybe it's not the most important thing, or maybe it's not the most enjoyable thing you do? Put you on the spot. I'll start with mine. How many of you will sing? You may enjoy singing as a part of worship. Yes, I got you. So I'm asking you to tell on yourself a little bit. You really don't enjoy singing that much. Like, okay, I'll give you an example. You're driving down the road and you're listening to Fox News instead of the local radio station. That's me, right? I could live through my life and not sing. It's not something for me that's super enjoyable. I don't think I do it well. If you've been around my wife, you know that she does it very well. And there's many of you in the church that do it very well. And so in contrast in styles there of communication, someone who does something very well, they're usually very good at it. They practice it. They think about it. It's something that they are intentful about. And for those of you who don't enjoy doing something, then you might not be as good at it because it just doesn't challenge you. You don't think about it that way. And I think within the church, we have both kinds of people. We probably even have a middle of the ground group, right? That you like it, it's great, take it or leave it. But I think for us, as we talk about this subject material tonight, we're expected to sing. We're expected to make melody in our heart. And so how can we do it well? So I want to continue on with this writing here. Men sang out their feelings long before they were able to speak their thoughts. Again, this is a written article by a man like me or like you, right? So it's strongly opinion-based, okay? Just keep that in reference. But of course, we must not imagine that singing means exactly the same thing here as in a modern concert hall. When we say that speech originated in song, What we mean is merely that our comparatively monotonous spoken language and our highly developed vocal music are differentiations of primitive utterances, which had more in them of the latter than the former. Those utterances were at first like the singing of the birds, or the roaring of animals, or the crooning of babies, something that could be as an emotion, maybe not so much as sentence structure. So we could go on and on and on about this, right? You get what I'm saying. And I probably have never spent a lot of time thinking about singing in that context, because in my lifetime it just always has been. My mom was a singer, she sang. When my mom was a teenager, she recorded a 45 record and when she lived in Chicago, right? So I thought those were neat things, but I never cared if I did it. It was not something important to me, right? Am I the only one that could say it ever crossed your mind to think about it in these terms? I told you when I started, I'm an engineer, right? So my brain works a little bit differently, right? So for us to think about this just a little bit longer, we don't really know how singing evolved into what it is today for us. We don't know. There's certainly written articles, but most of these things are presumptions before there were written documentation about things or written historical record of things. So it's just people's ideas of it. But you can connect to those thoughts as we talk about it. I still don't know, and as a form of a challenge to us, why did the Jews in their worship, how did they get to this point where they were singing these songs to one another, where it became a matter of their worship? Maybe even when they were home and maybe they were facing difficulties or those kind of things. Maybe these were like prayers to them. It was obviously very important. And so I want to read through some of these Psalms tonight. And I want us to look at the wording of some of these tonight as it relates to I don't think we've answered the question about where singing came from, but I wanted to start there with the idea so that you could get your frame of reference right. Because as we read some of these Psalms, the language is filled with emotion. It's filled with pleas to God. It's filled with thanksgiving to God. It's filled with anxiety and urgency and a lot of things that are all connected, if I use the word emotion. Emotion. So we're going to read some of those and we're going to go through them a little bit in more detail. And I think where I would land in wrapping all of that up is to say, while I may not enjoy singing as a practice, I think we can all say that in this building or in the middle of a worship service where singing is happening, how can we look at the lyrical music, the lyrics and the music, and think about how can I fill my heart with the emotion as the psalmist did as they wrote these songs. And so, I could stop there and wrap this whole thing up and say that's the summary. How can we as Christians do a better job of singing and making this critical part of our worship so much more pleasing to God's ears?
Don, I was thinking whether it's someone writing the song or whether you're singing the song or quoting the song, how many feelings and things are in a song that we don't say on a day-to-day basis. Maybe
Caroline, that's exactly the expression that I think about as well. Words are powerful, right? So if you've ever lost a loved one close to you, and maybe you hear a song that you knew they liked a lot, maybe they sung it a lot, right? It can make you very emotional in times when you don't even plan it. It just happens to you, right? What else in life invokes that kind of an emotional response? It could be, a family member and you went to their funeral and they sang a collection of songs at their funeral, and then it triggers to you that's that emotional connection for that event. And I think what you said there is exactly my thought, is that why the book of Psalms, why the Jews wrote these, articulated these, created these, was because of the emotional connection that it gave them during worship. If you read these, and I would encourage you to all to read them again if you haven't in a while, and look for those words of emotion, those words of compassion, those words of heavy distress. And you ask yourself, why is it that those words were written after language had evolved from grunts and singing of birds to writing something on page? Think about that transition period from the beginning of time to where the Jews were actually doing this, and it was a part of their lives, a part of their worship.
Think about how we view songs sometimes. Now, I know Chris does a lot with the young kids, helps them remember stuff. And so perhaps that was a part of things as well, because they didn't all have a copy of the Bible.
That's right. Yes.
In fact, it was a privilege to get a hold of a little piece and be able to look at it. But perhaps that's the way they memorize things, is to put it in song. And I've never really thought about the evolution of song or music, but I'd like to think that, the angels have always sang and praised. I'd like to think that the reason why God created a bird that could sing is that he likes music. And so I'd like to think that the evolution was all the way back to the very beginning.
So maybe God put those things in motion for us, knowing that that's where we would be, right? He created everything else. We're in Genesis, we're used to that spontaneous creation of man and of earth. It's hard to come sometimes to think about it in terms of God did put those things in motion for us.
But music, song, like was mentioned there, I think for me, it definitely brings emotion. Because I can hear a song that from back when I was 10 years old, and I'm immediately back at that moment. I can think about a song that my mom used to sing when she was cleaning or cooking. So we just got finished with Mr. Jim's funeral, and they were playing Stafford Brothers. That was big in their house, So I think there's very few things like song and music that elicit that type of response and that emotion.
Very good thoughts. And I think, again, everything you touched on there is true for all of us in the way we think about it in some way. It's how we connect to things. I was thinking about this. This is not a religious example at all, but how many of you have been to a concert, like a music concert, country music, gospel, rock, anything, right? A lot of people would say yes. How many times have you looked around, the people that are around you you don't know, and they are singing with all of their being because they're so motivated in that moment that it just like it comes out of you, right? You know the lyrics, and then people. This is certainly not a comment about dancing as a right or a wrong, but you'll also see when people go to concerts, their body moves with their voice. There's a lot, whether you're in the smosh pit or whatever at a rock concert, or whether you're gospel singing or country music singing, your knees start to bounce, your foot starts to move. It invokes emotion from us in varying ways. And so I would challenge us also to think about when we're singing in church and we're worshiping God, we need to find that emotion. We need to find that emotion. Even for those of us who are terrible singers, don't enjoy it so much, we need to connect to the lyrics. Because if God thought it was so important that the inspired word, the Bible that we use to govern us in every facet of our lives, an entire book was created just for that, it's super important. So as we pray, as we listen to a lesson, as we partake in the communion, it's an essential step in the totality of worship for us. And I think that even more so than that, I think about the Psalms, and as I've read through this book again over the last few days and refreshing my memory about it, because I'm not in this book a lot, I realize there's a lot of things being said here that are applicable across time. And so we are each in a different phase of our lives within day to day. Things that we're emotional about, things that we're angry about, things that we feel like we have a high amount of anxiety about. Maybe we're truly worried about the future of the economy. Maybe we're worried about a family member who's sick. Maybe we have, maybe we want something so badly, but we're not getting the answer we want in the timeline that we want. I think that the book of Psalms has a lot of context that's applicable to every one of those situations. So not only are we talking about how we use song in our worship, lyrical representation, using these words, it's clear that these people are these writers of this information, of this language, of this utterances, were emotional about it. And so, I can't write music. I don't write songs. I don't even know how the process goes, to be honest with you. But I think about people who do this, who write songs, who are able to take thoughts that they have and write it out on paper in such an organized way that it articulates some emotional thought. The fact that it may rhyme or has some cadence about it, and I'm using terrible English. I'm not even sure what to say there. I'm not articulating it very well. How about that? But for them to be able to create it in that way is super special for somebody who has that gift to do it. These people, these writings were clearly done in that fashion. In the earliest of times, they were able to organize their thoughts in such a way that throughout generations, we're still talking about them today and how they apply. All right, so let's start reading some of these Psalms. It's about 7:30. We have a few more minutes. Let's read some of these Psalms and let's just talk about them a little bit. Go to Psalm chapter 3, verse 1. Let's start at the beginning. We're just going to work our way through some of these and look at the words and just trying to think about how they might apply. So Psalms chapter 3, verse 1. Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. We can relate to that. There's a bunch of people out there that don't like me. There are people out there that at work that don't get me. There are people on my sports team that don't like me. They say I'm not good enough. We can fashion any thought in our daily lives in that first two sentences of that verse, of that chapter. Chapter 3, but you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. How many of you recognize those words? Right? We still sing a song with those same lyrics today. So someone who was a lot more creative than me, took those words in their own written way, was some type of song, and created a new song that we sing modern today.
There's another piece to that I think applies about what you just said, of how this has went through time. And if somebody in here, if it was appropriate, just went and broke out and went to singing that song, it would be natural for the rest of us to feel compelled, if we knew the words, go ahead and sing that song too. It brings about camaraderie, unity, and fellowship. It makes us who we are. It's like I hate a bad analogy. If you go to Rocky Top and then we're winning a game and it's over with, that whole place will light up in camaraderie of singing a hillbilly song. I don't know how we sing in the first place, but we enjoy it. We have that camaraderie in songs that we sing. And it jumped out to me in these funerals that we just attended on some of the songs that come out. You know, people read books. It makes people feel things, and we know it, we feel it toward one another. That's who we are. That's what we do. We sing these songs to God. And I think it's bonding in its approach to sing these songs.
Very good points. Yes, sir.
Along with what he said, and totally different from this song. We were in Israel a few years ago, and the guide said, we were on a road. She said, as the people marched to or walked to Jerusalem for the feast and all, that many of these songs they'd sing, together. They walked along.
Yeah.
So it was a sense of camaraderie. Hey, we're going to do something.
Yeah, interesting. You can think about it, again, whether you're, as you said, they're walking together to a worship or to a community event of some sort, right? You can think about this in even outside of the religious context. Music invokes us. It invokes emotional responses from us. Sometimes it's extreme happiness. Sometimes it's, in an extreme way. Let me say this, Don, and then I'll come back to you. You could be driving down the road and you're listening to something that has an upbeat to it, and before you know it, you're speeding. Involuntary response, right? Go ahead, Don.
There is a song for any emotion that you have. Whatever your range of emotions are, there is a song that fits it.
I don't think there's an argument of that at all. I think it's articulated very well there, Don. Everything you can think of emotionally as a human, it's probably been felt before by someone, and they articulated words about it in such a way that's a song. It's just in everyday walks of life, right? You can see people walking down the street. You see people on the airplane. They've got earbuds in or AirPods or whatever, and they're singing. They're listening, right? They're in a zone where they want to be. So I guess I'm just thinking about it in terms of the reason why we sing in worship is supposed to do that for us, and it does. Yeah.
I think you kind of hit on a little bit right there, but I'm going to kind of flip it on its head and say that I don't think that songs evoke emotion, but rather that emotion evokes song. And what I mean by that is the most powerful thing that we have, whether we want to admit it or not, is the written word. Because when we write something, we don't have to vocalize it, and for us, that's easier. So that's why
Very nice comments, and I think those apply. I was thinking when you were talking there for a minute is that there's two perspectives with that. There is the person who creates the song, who writes it down, who is able to, in an emotional moment, articulate a thought on paper, and then organize those lyrics in a way that, when sung, are enjoyed enough by someone who is a great singer to want to continue to sing it over and over again, right? So in these cases, someone was able to create it. Someone had the idea that I have this emotion and I want to write it down. I want to repeat it. And then it became something that they were singing to others, and then it caught on, right? And all songs are that way today. A new artist will release a song on the radio. We hear it once or twice, and we like the tune. We like the beat, then we start singing it, and then it becomes, we know the lyrics about it, right? And it becomes something very quickly to us, usually. By the time we hear the song the second time, we're Googling the lyrics so that we can memorize them. And I think that's exactly what's happened through time. And I think that's also what the scriptures are saying. These individuals, these people in this time, that's how it evolved for them as well. You know, the scriptures tell us a lot of things about the thou shalls, thou shall nots, words that are instructional in nature. But the lyrics of music, as it relates to how we worship, is something that we can create through our own emotional response to situations. That's what these songs here are, individuals' thoughts about an emotional response to a situation. So it gives us, I think this gives us a free amount of, or a little bit of leadway with our emotional connection to God and how we say things, how we articulate things. I think singing is underappreciated in our worship. I think sometimes we tend to, because we often know them by heart, we don't have to open the book up, we've done them through repetition. But in that repetition, sometimes we lose contextual importance. So, I think so.
Very emotional service. You know, the singing was, I think we really thought about what we sang. I don't know, I still remember.
You know, I remember, I'm trying to think of the context really quickly. This is dangerous. But a minister here, we were singing the invitation song. And, you know, and Mr. Lynn was leading the singing. And we got to the third verse, I think, of a 3-verse song, and there had been no responses. And our minister at the time said, stop. And he stopped all singing right in the middle of it. I see some heads nodding up. You remember these events. Maybe not here, but somewhere else it's happened, right? And he said, I know there are people here today that need this song. I'm putting in some Don words here, okay, so bear with me. And let's sing that verse one more time. Yeah. And others. Bill Goodpasture was who I was thinking about, to be honest with you, right? I don't know how many times he did it, but I know he did it at least once. I see a hand 5 times. I don't know, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
When we were in our groups, our small groups, back with the others, and that was the thing that I said was, with singing and music, it's the vulnerability that causes the emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the examples that we were talking about there, we sung those 3 verses, and it felt like that maybe we weren't emotionally connected to the words and the lyrics and the moment until, in this case, Brother Goodpasture started saying, hey, people, wake up. Listen to me. Listen to the words we're singing. Think about them. And I think we sung that last verse 3 more times. 3 more times. And by the time we were done, I think there were 20 people up front asking for help, asking for prayers. And so I think that, again, singing is important in our worship. So it's 7:43. I'm going to stop. I had planned to continue through all of the Psalms, several of the chapters, and reading some of those Psalms, and then picking up the songbook and reading the ones that we sing today. They're exact lyrical representations of the same. But I'm not going to because of time, because there won't be a natural place to stop. But I would tell you, I would ask you to do that, to go home and to think about that, and to think about the lyrics of songs that we're singing today. Read Psalms all over again and look at those words there, and to figure out how you can connect to those lyrics as it's appropriate for you. It might not be today. You may be feeling very, very good about yourself, and you may be wanting to thank God for everything He's done for you. There is a psalm there that does that for you. So use those words in the scriptures to find those emotions that you need for the day or that you're experiencing for the day, and internalize it, right? And maybe that helps us when we are worshiping God and we do sing these songs, to take us to a place where we are vulnerable, where we are emotional. Okay, that's it. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks.